Hey, this is Ralph Brandt from the Fireside. I was watching a YouTube video the other night and I ran across this one, The Worst Programming Language Ever by Mark Rendell. But we're going to talk about him. He starts out by calling COBOL the worst programming language ever. Now he classifies other languages that have some of the same defects, but COBOL is the one that comes up first. As a person who has written for assemblers, RPG, PHP, Perl, Rex, Fortran, CICS, DCL, IBM JCL, Python, C, Basic, Visual Basic, HTML, Java, JavaScript, and several database languages. And by the way, I forgot. I programmed COBOL from 1965 until 2000. I am still writing some code on the Raspberry Pi and PC. I addressed him. Your erroneous portrayal of COBOL was enough to have me turn it off, and maybe someone who knew COBOL felt it prudent to sabotage the AV equipment to keep you from further embarrassing yourself. By the way, his AV equipment quit about 7 or 8 minutes in, and he had to stand there in front of the group while they got it running again. Most of what you said about COBOL is the standard COBOL bashing crap. You should be charged with plagiarism for putting it on. The first item you showed on Hello World was close to accurate, but you omitted on later ones some code that is necessary to execute in most development environments that's injected by the development environment when developing, but is needed in the production environment. They are one that says things like PHP. Now, to the meat of this. Your IBM examples of COBOL were crap. The Hello World would not need the source and object code lines. They are documentation, not necessary lines. The select clause is not needed unless you want to make the program complicated. It only sets the name CONSL so that you can use it in the display rather than the actual COBOL word console. I have been looking at well over 5,000 COBOL programs over the years. I worked with 6 companies' Y2K revisions as well as a programmer for a Fortune 100 company from 65 to 96, and I wrote COBOL, CICS, assembler, as well as C, DCL, that's a DEC language, and I have never seen a select clause used for that purpose. We just didn't do it. It could be done, but we didn't do it. It just made the program more complicated and more difficult for someone to work with who knew COBOL well and would have had to look back at the select clause to find out what you were doing. Why not use just console? By the way, my early COBOL days were on coding sheets, key punched into cards. The only requirements for a COBOL program are ID division, environment division, data division, procedure division, program ID. That means those lines are the only ones needed other than stop run. The display Hello World on console would have been the only other necessary statement. A total of about 8. You apparently did not know that stop run can be placed anywhere in the program if you had an unrecoverable error. If a program ended with an implied stop run, a performed procedure at the end of the program would have stopped the program. Your ignorance of COBOL is obvious. By the way, it has still done more productive work than any other language. You missed mentioning that until COBOL, every computer change required rewriting all programs. COBOL allowed them to be recompiled and in many cases would run without any modification. It was a game changer. We had a 305 RAMAC before I worked for the company, then a 1401, then went to a System 360 Model 30. All of our programs had to be rewritten from the RAMAC to the 1401, then to the 360. We never had to rewrite a program through IBM 360 Model 30, 40, 55, 135, 145, and the later 4341. We did have some issues going from COBOL D to COBOL F, but we did that in a few weeks of compile, fix errors, look for some statements that were known issues. I can only remember it was a change in the way a parentheses if statement with ands, ors, and nots were evaluated. Test the program, and we were done. We had over 1,000 programs, and it only took us a couple weeks. Reprogramming the 1401 to the 360 from the 1401 SPS to COBOL took us nearly a year. We never changed the source and object computer statements that you made so much about. You Johnny-come-latelys forget whose shoulders you stand on. Try looking up Grace Hopper. COBOL is probably not the greatest programming language, but there are many functions that it is the best for, has been the best for, and quite frankly, knowing the other languages I do, many of the things that we did then could not have been done with them. For one thing, the COBOL is a compiled language. That means you change it into the actual machine language through a compile that takes a few minutes. Then you do not have to spend computer cycles interpreting every line every time, as many of the newer languages do, or, as in the case of Java, running it on an unknown machine that has to translate everything when it's run. Sure, now we have much more powerful computers. Computer cycles are cheaper. We can afford them. But in 1965, COBOL was the ideal, and in some cases it still is today. Your charge that it is the worst programming language ever is just bogus. COBOL has been with us for over 40 years, and it has not gone away. This is Ralph Brandt from the Fireside.